guys, it's Libby, and today I should be filming either my wrap-up for the month of June or my review of Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. But I watched about 2 minutes of like a really old YouTube video of someone talking about the situation with Dumbledore not being portrayed as gay in the latest Fantastic Beasts movie, and it just brought up all of my wizarding thoughts, so I thought I would finally, after like 5 years, make a Harry Potter related video. I made a review of The Cursed Child shortly after it came out, but I have not really talked about Harry Potter on my BookTube channel, which makes me a serious outlier. I have read the 7 main novels, as well as The Cursed Child and the 2 textbooks, but not Tales of Beedle the Bard or the script books for the Fantastic Beasts films. So here's just various thoughts and complaints and questions and fan theories that I have about J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World. Starting with the one that doesn't really have to do with the books. Sorry if that's what you're here for. And that is the other problem with the portrayal of Dumbledore in the Fantastic Beasts movie. I know, like, the obvious problem is that Joanne, you said he was gay, and then you hath not maketh him gay. And that topic is definitely more deserving of discussion than the thing I am going to discuss. But the thing I am going to discuss is not worthy of no discussion, and I feel like it's being distinctly overshadowed. So, Jude Law, the man is too old to be playing Dumbledore. When you read the Harry Potter books, it is clear that Dumbledore is an old man. But I never got the impression that he was like unrealistically old. I assumed he was in his like 70s, 80s, maybe 90s. It's set in the 1990s, which means Dumbledore should have been born in the first couple decades of the 20th century, and this is also confirmed by the fact that Dumbledore was a professor 50 years ago when the like flashbacks of Chamber of Secrets is going on. So I assumed, you know, Dumbledore was like 30 in the 50 years ago flashback, so during the main 7 novels, he's in his 80s. But the Fantastic Beasts movies are set in the 1920s, and Jude Law, who is playing Dumbledore, is a 46-year-old man who looks like a 46-year-old man, and if anything is kind of being aged up in his portrayal of Dumbledore with like the big beard and the emphasizing his receding hairline. And so that means he wasn't born in the first few decades of the 20th century. It means he was born in the last few decades of the 19th century, which means during the Harry Potter books, he's in his 100 and teens, which I find hard to believe, unless maybe I'm forgetting something. I have not read any of the books since the 7th one came out. Did Dumbledore get a hand on some of that magic Nicholas Flamel potion and like freeze his age for a bit? I don't think he did, but maybe he did. That's the only excuse. Otherwise, Fantastic Beasts obviously not canon because Dumbledore is the wrong age. Okay, and now that I have issued a complaint, I feel it is only right that I address a complaint, and this is basically going to be a restating of a tweet thread that I posted like a year ago in response to something that Brock from Let's Read said. And this is not like a Brock, why you so dumb on Twitter thing. I think Brock is great. He is an excellent Twitter follow, and he made a really interesting insight that I did not pick up on, but that I do have an exclamation for. Exclamation? I have an explanation for it. See, you need all sorts to make a world. So he shows a picture of Jude Law in the films and Michael Gambon in the films and says, at some point, the wizarding world eschews modern fashion for some kind of faux wizard revival. Dumbledore gets caught up with the fantasy literature of the 1960s. And I was like, interesting conundrum. Let's puzzle this one out. I like fashion. I like the politics of fashion. I feel like this is right up my alley. So I did some research, by which I mean looked at stills from the films. Such hardcore research. I am totally willing to accept that I will be contradicted in this by things in the text, but since Brock was pointing to the aesthetic of the films, I think it is appropriate for me to respond by talking about the aesthetic of the films. So I found some pictures of the people who work for the Ministry, like Barty Crouch and Cornelius Fudge, and they are not wearing robes. They're wearing reasonably modern suits, like second half of the 20th century appropriate suits. So then I went and looked at the professors and what sorts of things are they wearing, and it seems like it's only the career academics who dress in robes. So Professor Flitwick is shown in robes, Snape, McGonagall, and Dumbledore, they are all shown in robes. However, other professors are much more likely to be shown in modern clothes, or at least second half of the 20th century clothes, potentially with like an element of robiness to them, but the emphasis is more on the modern clothes. So Umbridge, Slughorn, and Lupin, who all are not career academics but just come to teach, in the middle or the later half of their career, they are wearing the suits. But we still have to address, why are these career academics still wearing medievally looking robes? Well, outside of the wizarding world, in what we might be so bold as to call the real world, academics did wear robes well into the 20th century. If you were a college professor, the thing you would wear when you taught your classes was some academic robes, which were based on the clothes of like the 12th and 13th centuries. Nowadays, college professors will normally only wear their academic robes for like official college functions, but I know when I was at my graduation ceremony and I saw all my professors blinged out in their practically medieval garb, I was like, this is awesome! They should dress like this all the time. So that fact should give us a reason that they're still wearing robes well into the 20th century, and then at the end of the mid-20th century, why don't I just say in the 1970s, Voldemort was doing his thing, and I think once you have this sort of splinter group, that is a bad time to modernize aesthetically. Hogwarts is a key institution in the English wizarding world. It appears that every English wizard has been to that one school, and so it makes sense that Hogwarts would want to maintain its aesthetics rather than innovate in its aesthetics, because if you innovate, then you're saying we are the ones who are straying from the like core truths of wizardom, whatever that is. Whereas if you keep your aesthetic, then you can say, but these ultra-conservative people are the ones who are straying from core wizarding aesthetic. And although I think Voldemort might have a point in that his view of the wizarding world is more traditional and more like historically accurate, that is not a winning narrative for the anti-Voldemort side, and you can combat that narrative in many ways, but one of those ways is through aesthetics. And then looking at any robe wearers who may be referenced beyond the academia scene, my justification for that is that the wizarding community is a really tiny niche community, more on that later. And if they are not forced to change their clothes, a lot of times niche communities will preserve their traditional dress in order to more easily identify each other. And so now, of course, we need to talk about the fact that the wizarding community is so bloody tiny and what this means for these books. Okay, so I read these books pretty carefully, and I sort of picked up on this around about book 3. And so as I was reading all of the following books, I was really paying close attention to this fact, and nowhere did it seem to be contradicted. And that is that in 1 year of Hogwarts, 1 grade level, there are 40 students. There are 5 boys and 5 girls in each Hogwarts house. And I'm guessing that that must be because that's the size of the dormitories. The dormitories each have 5 beds, and you do 1 grade and then gender segregate per house. So yeah, 40 students in a year. And this has all sorts of wackadoodle implications. One, it really shows you how tiny of a minority the wizards are. I did some census research and some math, and I discovered that there are about 750,000 11-year-olds in Britain right now. There were probably fewer back in the 90s, but still 40 people being chosen out of 250,000, that's minuscule. It also kind of throws off the sorting hat ceremony, because it means the sorting hat has to put 5 boys and 5 girls into each house, which means, like, if you're the last person, you don't get to pick like, the house you end up in is not at all related to, like, how your temperament actually is. It's just based on whichever one is left. My workaround theory for this is that the Sorting Hat has some sort of ability to judge the pool of students in front of him before he actually gets put on their heads, and then he just gets to do a little bit of a deeper dive when he's put on their head. So he has a rough idea of who's going where at the beginning of the ceremony before he actually sorts each of the children. My conspiracy theory explanation for this is that the professors have already like researched the students and already know what kind of temperaments they have and what houses they need to be sorted into, and then the Sorting Hat is just a formality. And also, like, what if one year you just get like a bunch of Ravenclaws? Like, something happens, just make everyone a mega nerd that year. Are some people gonna be like stuck with Gryffindors and they're just like trying to be a nerd the whole time while the Gryffindors are like, let's go have fun and play Quidditch? And so like everyone older and younger than them has a really different profile than like their own little year cohort. And also, since we're segregating by gender, how do you deal with trans kids is a question J.K. Rowling definitely did not consider when she started writing this series. I think I followed that thread as far as it will go, but like, only 40 kids per year means that the wizarding community is so tiny, as I mentioned, and like, I feel like it's plausible that we at least get a passing reference to every English wizard who exists during the time of the Harry Potter books. So assuming that all of the wizards who are born in England end up going to Hogwarts and there's not like an exchange program with Durmstrang in case, you know, Hogwarts is full that year, the Weasleys kept having kids and now we don't have room for your child. That would mean there's roughly 3,000 wizards alive at any one time. And if you include like everybody who gets the slightest reference that, you know, Harry walks past in Diagon Alley or in the Ministry of Magic, I think we may get a reference to like every wizard who exists. Good news about the tiny population size though, it's really easy to get tickets to the Quidditch World Cups. You've got like at least a 1 in 2 chance, I think. The stadium is huge. Okay, final and most self-serving question of the video. What house am I in? I know what house I'm not in. I'm not in Hufflepuff. I am very afraid of toil, but like Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Gryffindor all have plausibility. Part of the issue with Slytherin is that the books are confused about what it wants to do with Slytherin. Is it like, no, they're definitely just the evil house and all the evil kids go there. Good news, there's only a 25% evil rate among wizards. I mean, it could definitely be worse. So sometimes they're like that, and sometimes they're like, no, Slytherins are just like good at being people. I think that's what they're doing. It's like they're loyal to their friends. Is it Gryffindors who are loyal to their friends? Slytherins are like cunning and loyal to their friends and good at manipulation, which is maybe a good thing, I guess. So then there's Ravenclaw, and I feel like I most clearly perform Ravenclaw. I'm like a nerd who likes to read, so that seems pretty Ravenclaw-y. Also quite like the color blue, so, you know, that helps. But when I did the famous Pottermore quiz, Pottermore, peace be upon it, put me into Gryffindor. And at first, I was like, okay, I have been sorted by the Great Pottermore into the House of Gryffindor. I need to embody this now. I need to run with it. I need to identify with Godric himself. But you know, I just felt like it really wasn't working. And anytime I read about like what a Gryffindor was, I was like, so many of those things are not me. And anytime I read about what a Ravenclaw was, I was like, so many of those things are me. But then I remembered, like, based on reading the books, it seems like part of being a Gryffindor is having a crisis about whether or not you deserve to be in Gryffindor. So maybe that makes me need to be in Gryffindor in a like Cartesian way. My very doubt confirms my existence in a Gryffindor state. Is my head too far up my ass? Okay, thank you for watching the second Harry Potter video I have ever made in 5 years. Yep, okay, thank you, bye.